There are a lot of scarves in here. Is it cold in here? Okay, it's a theme. I have two items at the top. On Indonesia, obviously, many of you have been following the missing AirAsia flight. Some of you have covered this, but I just wanted to give a brief update on our assistance, given we haven't discussed that in here. 10 days ago, we, of course, learned that the Indonesia AirAsia flight 8501 went missing. The United States offers condolences to the families and loved ones of those who perished on the flight. Our thoughts and prayers continue to be with those who await news on the passengers and crew who remain missing. Indonesia continues to lead the search operation, and the United States has been happy to offer support. As the Department of Defense has announced, the U.S. Navy has offered ships, helicopters, sonar equipment, and small boats. They have all contributed to the search efforts. In particular, the USS Sampson and the USS Fort Worth are actively engaged with search activities in close coordination with Indonesia's National Search and Rescue Agency. In addition, Indonesian participants in the search effort are recipients of training supported by funding from the State Department's Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement. This includes police search and rescue, divers deployed to the site who are trained under a maritime law enforcement project. Indonesian laboratories being used for victim identification have also received past law enforcement forensics capacity building support. Also, on upcoming travel, Secretary Kerry will travel to Ahmedabad, India, on January 10th to attend the Vibrant Gujarat Global Investors Summit, inaugurated by Indian Prime Minister Modi. The Secretary will join leading U.S. business executives and innovators at the summit to highlight the critical role that U.S. technology plays in supporting sustainable economic growth across India and the Indo-Pacific region, as well as strengthening trade and investment between the two countries. This is the first time the United States will join the event as a partner country. Secretary Kerry may travel to additional countries, but any other stops would be announced at a later date. With that, Matt?
Right. Yesterday we had a rather lengthy exchange about Cuba. Not only on the political prisoners that are supposed to be released, but also on the dates for the upcoming trip and migration talks. So I'm wondering if you can update us at all on either or both of those issues.
I don't have an update on the trip quite yet. We're still finalizing details for that. We hope to have that locked down in the coming days. In terms of prisoners, which you're right, we had a discussion on yesterday. As Raul Castro indicated in his December 17th speech, the Cuban government made the decision to release these individuals as part of the discussions with them. They will this is a commitment that they made not just to the United States, but to the Vatican as well. We will continue, of course, to urge the Cuban government to follow through on its commitment. They've already released some of the prisoners. We'd like to see this completed in the near future. And certainly that's something we'll continue to discuss. I'd also like to note that while we're still finalizing the agenda for the migration talks, we plan on discussing human rights issues directly with the Cuban government at the migration and normalization talks in Havana later this month, and that will certainly be a topic that continues to be a focus of our discussion.
Okay, is it correct as that the release, though, while you would like to see it happen in the near future, doesn't have to be done for Assistant Secretary Jacobson to go and actually have these talks?
Correct. I would just like to emphasize this list is not to be seen as the end of our discussion on human rights with the government of Cuba. It is part of certainly what we see as an important effort and a step that the Cuban government committed to, not just to us, but to the Vatican. And we're, of course, encouraging them to continue to implement it. Some have been released already.
Right. Well, I don't think anyone's saying it's the end, but it certainly is the beginning. And if they don't even begin at the beginning, then,
Well, they have, they have begun. Some prisoners have
Well,
been
I know,
released.
but you would think, though, that once they've released the 53 and they're all actually out of custody, that would be the beginning, right? I mean, this
Sure.
is, I mean, and just promising something to you and to the Pope doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to actually happen, right?
Well,
People have
they've
lied to popes for
Matt,
centuries and
first of all,
centuries.
there have already been some prisoners
Right.
released. I also think it's important to note that we've been very careful about discussing these prisoners in this process because we're not looking to put a bigger target on Cuban political dissidents. We're looking to get them released, and this is the process that we think will be most effective in getting that done.
Okay. Well, there has been some on the Hill. It will come as no surprise to you. People who are opposed to the idea of any kind of reconciliation while or normalization, while the government of Cuba remains the current government of Cuba, have said that have said that they don't think that it's a good idea for Assistant Secretary Jacobson to actually go down there and have these talks and begin the discussion of normalization until the Cubans at least make good on this early preliminary initial pledge. Is it the administration's position that that you welcome the congressional input, but you're not going to abide by it?
Well, we certainly welcome congressional input, but I would just reiterate what our view is, which is that this is an opportunity to discuss human rights issues directly. It is not as if our policy of several decades was working previously. Our new policy, by opening up Cuba to the United States, we will do more to empower the Cuban people than by keeping them isolated. It's certainly not in the interest of Americans or the interest of civil society activists to not continue these discussions and begin to make progress on some of these different components. And so our view is that continuing to engage in this process provides an opportunity to have a dialogue about how to make progress.
Okay, and just last one, and I want to go back to this thing about the Vatican. Why is it that you think that it's so important that the Cubans not only told you, meaning the U.S. government, that they would release it, but also the Vatican? I mean, I'm not sure I understand why that's. Why is that germane? To somehow because they promised the Roman Catholic Church that they would do this, that means they're more likely to do it than if they had only said it to you guys?
Well, I think obviously the Vatican played a unique role in this process, and it's just important to emphasize that this is a negotiation that wasn't just the United States. There are many in the international community who feel that this path forward is the most beneficial path forward.
Can I follow up on that?
Sure, go ahead.
So, yes, correct me if I'm wrong. Yesterday you said you couldn't confirm publicly that one of those prisoners had been released. Now you're saying that some have been released.
Yes.
Do you know how many?
I'm not going to get into specifics of numbers.
Is it important that a specific number or that there is a threshold of those 53 that need to be released for these talks to really go ahead with some mutual trust?
I would just say I would de-emphasize the link between the two. There are many components of why our new approach to Cuba is going to help civil society, help human rights activists, help the human rights community in Cuba. Certainly, the step to release political prisoners is one we feel is important. That's why we've talked about it. But having a dialogue, opening up access to be able to communicate, to organize, those are all steps we feel is important. And the third thing I would just say, which I meant to mention in response to Matt's question, is that for decades now, the United States policy toward Cuba has isolated us in the region, and it has been used as an excuse by the Castro regime to blame the United States for the lack of access to the internet, to the ability to communicate in Cuba. That's no longer the case. And so there are many benefits we hear. Yeah, we feel that there are to moving forward on this policy. Yes, of course, we feel that the release of political prisoners is very important. That's why we mentioned it and why it was announced as part of the discussion. This is an ongoing process. We didn't expect it would be overnight. They've committed to do this, and we'll continue to have a discussion about it.
And to just get more into details about the list, who actually put together this list?
The United States did.
Was it the White House that came up with this list?
This was, as you know, there were two individuals who work out of the NSC who were involved in the negotiations. Obviously, there were others through the interagency who were, coordinating behind the scenes or discussing behind the scenes. But it's a process that was put together by the administration.
Because the dissidents argue that this list, that they haven't been consulted about this list, and that some of the prisoners might actually have already been released. One of the difficulties in this kind of list is that, for example, I think it was Mitterrand when he went and he looked at prisoners released. Some of them had already been released. Are you absolutely certain that most of those prisoners were actually still in jail at the time that the list was compiled?
Well, I can assure you that the list was carefully put together, and certainly the goal and objective was to get the release of additional political prisoners. It wasn't to check a box or just be able to say we took part in a release when they were already released. This also isn't the end. There are additional, there could be more, but this is the list, obviously, that we're focused on now.
Can I just, one more
Sure.
question? Are these prisoners all are they political prisoners? None of them have any other kind of backgrounds that you were interested in? Was there a certain
That's how I would
background that
describe them. I don't think there's more description I would offer at this point.
Jen, just logistically, in terms of the regulations, the Treasury and Commerce regulations, they still haven't been published. So I'm just wondering if you have any idea when that's actually going to happen? When are people going to be able to legally bring back their $100 worth of rum and cigars?
I knew cigars would be a part of that. Well, as Assistant Secretary Roberta Jacobson mentioned when she was here in this briefing room in December, this is obviously one of the first steps in the process. It takes some time to put regulations together. It's weeks, not months. I can see if there's more of a specific update from some of the agencies responsible for that.
Okay, but I mean, do you expect that part of it to be done before she goes towards the end of the third week of January?
I wouldn't. I can get in and see if there's an update on it, Matt. But I think what's important to note about the migration talks is they were previously scheduled. Obviously, we're looking at a different environment now, but we're not looking at that as a deadline or a timeline. It's a part of the process, an opportunity to have a discussion, of which there will be many around that outside of it.
Okay, but when the president made his announcement, there was in the hours after that announcement, there was a lot of interest from people who want to take advantage of the general licenses that will be available for the 12 categories.
Sure.
And the people are waiting.
I understand that, and clearly there's a lot of interest and excitement about the opening up of diplomatic relations. We understand that. It takes some time to put proper regulations in place, and Commerce and Treasury are working on that now.
Can I also clarify, sorry, just a few more things. Is there some step that you would like that Cuba has asked the US to do before Roberta Jacobson gets to Havana?
I just wouldn't link things to Assistant Secretary Jacobson's trip to Havana. This is an ongoing process. We're going to continue to work on regulations. Cuba has released some of the prisoners. It will be an ongoing dialogue. So this is not the last trip. It's not the last conversation that will take place. It was a previously scheduled trip, and we're continuing to make progress on each of these components, regardless of the timing of the trip.
You said previously scheduled, but it wasn't previously scheduled for her to go, was it?
Well, she had been a couple of years ago, but the migration talks
not as Assistant Secretary of State.
Correct, but
I mean, you
in
keep
general,
saying
we
that-
have done the migration talks.
I understand that, but it wasn't. It's not as if this trip is nothing. You keep wanting to have it there be no links, but I mean, unless I'm really
not trying-
badly informed, she will be the highest-ranking U.S. official to
I am
visit
not
Cuba since
conveying
the
that at all.
Batista
I'm not
regime.
intending to convey it's not. She's obviously an incredibly high-ranking official.
Right.
There's an opportunity to discuss other components.
So
what I'm
what-
just conveying is that we're making progress on each of the different pieces
Right.
outside of that.
But so, because, as you say, incredibly high-ranking, okay, I'll accept that. But, because she is will be an important visitor to Cuba, you might think that could be used as some kind of leverage to get something. And you're saying she's going to go whether or not they release the rest of the 53. She's going to go whether or not they throw more people in jail from today onward. She's going to go whether the Cubans, all of a sudden shut down what limited internet access they have now. You're saying
That's not actually what I said.
Well, you're saying that she's going regardless of what happens.
Matt,
whether
what I'm
things get
conveying
worse
is
or
that
better.
there's a number of ways that we work to make progress on human rights issues. One of them is direct dialogue. This is an opportunity to have that as part of these talks. But there's also work. We're not waiting to make progress on the other components with a deadline of a couple of weeks from now.
I get that, but the criticism of this is that you've basically given up a point. It used to be, not so long ago, that a visit from a senior American official was something that was a big deal, and that was often accompanied by releases of prisoners and that kind of thing. And you seem to be saying that there are no prerequisites. This is just going to happen. This is going to happen regardless of what the situation is in Cuba.
Well, Matt, there's already been progress made on releases of some of the prisoners. That's an issue that obviously we want them to continue to make progress on. There are other components we're working on. A visit is part of our process, but I wouldn't link them all together. That's what I'm conveying.
Can you say a dozen, less than a dozen have been
I'm not
released?
going to give any numbers here today. Look, do we have any more in Cuba before we go on? Go ahead. Well,
A follow-up on the questions from yesterday's on
Sure.
Pakistan. Do you have figures for how much aid has been given to Pakistan under Kerry Lugar-Berman bill? so
sure, I
far?
have a little bit more for you. Let me just see what I can go through here. Okay. So there's two kinds, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, right? There's the Kerry Lugar-Berman bill funding. There's also appropriations funding. Let me just give you a quick update on some of the appropriations funding since you asked about that yesterday too.
Yes.
The most recent review of that was in September of 2014, based on the FY 2013 appropriation. At that time, a certification or waiver for a broad range of topics was required. After reviewing the full range of criteria required by law, the Department of State did not certify and instead employed the national interest waiver in that case as well, provided by Congress in the legislation. To answer Matt's question from yesterday, we have certified under the KLB criteria only once. That occurred for FY11 when the Department of State certified that Pakistan had met the requirements at that time. Additionally, a review was required, and this is a little confusing because this occurred before the 2013, but for the FY 2014 appropriations bill, prior to us notifying FY 2014 appropriations funding. That review and subsequent waiver was exercised in July of 2014, so it's essentially a waiver prior to the notification of the funding, which allows the department to then notify and obligate those funds, which we'll do this year, but as I mentioned yesterday, we haven't done at this point. In terms of total funding for FY 2013, which only began to come off a congressional hold in September 2014, Congress appropriated approximately $1.2 billion in assistance to Pakistan. FY 2014 funding for civilian assistance programs, as I mentioned yesterday, has not yet been notified. So those are the numbers and statistics I have to offer for you.
Can you rewind to the beginning of that and
Sure.
put it into English, into straightforward, understandable? That was the most confusing thing I've ever
Well,
heard.
I know, but budgetary
and I've
talk,
heard some pretty
budgetary
confusing
talk is a
things
little
from-
nerdy, Matt.
When was the like a little? My God.
Let me
So-
try to unwind it for you. Okay, go ahead.
When was the last time that the administration certified that Pakistan was cooperating fully and could get the money? Was 2011?
Was for FY 2011. I don't know what month or year necessarily that happened.
Post 2011, they have just gotten the waiver.
Yes.
In other words, you have been unable to certify that they're complying, but you have
With all of the requirements.
that they're not meeting all. You've been unable to certify that they're meeting all the requirements,
Mm-hmm.
but you have exercised the national security or national
Yes.
interest waiver. And how many times has that waiver been done then?
Well, there's two different types of funding legislation, KLB and appropriations. I'd have to check the exact number. It's been, there's been bills each year for
It
both.
remains the case, though, from what you said yesterday, or it was correct yesterday and still is correct today, that the last time they got the waiver was 2013. Is that
For
correct?
KLB, yes.
Okay.
Kerry Lugar-Berman funding. There's also appropriations funding, which there was a waiver granted in September of 2014 for that, which is a separate pot of money.
Okay, but it's counterterrorism money.
Well, I think there's different categories that each pot is used for. There's counterterrorism funding in each of them too, though.
So the total. This is something we probably go offline. We can go
Okay.
over it. It's very confusing. I don't understand.
Okay,
What are
let's.
the criteria which Pakistan couldn't meet? That's why, because of that, you couldn't give them the certificate.
Well, it doesn't mean that they haven't met. It means that some of the criteria hasn't been met. It
Yes,
doesn't
which are
mean that there
those?
hasn't been progress that's been made in some areas.
Yeah.
We typically don't break that down in a public manner, but obviously the funding is important and one we feel is important to our strategic relationship, and that's why, of course, a waiver has been granted in these cases.
So do you have any figure of how much has been given to Pakistan under KLB so far?
I'm happy to. We can take that question and get that back to you, Lalit. Any more on Pakistan? Okay, Japan. Go
And
ahead.
on the Secretary's trip, it's being reported that he will be traveling to Pakistan after India. Do you have any?
I don't have any more components of the trip to announce today. Go ahead, Japan.
Yeah.
Sure.
So yesterday you made some comments on the Prime Minister Abi's remarks at the New Year opening press conference, and you also mentioned about the importance of Murayama downwards and Murayama statement and Kono statement, and some people see that as a kind of pressure on Japanese government to take over those statements. So I'm
Well,
wondering whether
it
you
certainly
have.
wasn't intended to be. Let me just reiterate, or restate, I should say, that we welcome Prime Minister Abe's comments yesterday, including the positive message on history issues and Japan's post-war contributions to peace. We believe that strong and constructive relations between countries in the region promotes peace and stability and are in the interest of both the countries as well as the United States. I would also just note, since I have the opportunity, that Secretary Kerry and Foreign Minister Kushida had a phone call yesterday, we were trying to schedule for some time, where they discussed their desire to look forward to working together on a range of avenues of cooperation for 2015. They talked a little bit about the Middle East and the region and what's happening in the region, Ukraine, ISIL, Ebola. The Secretary thanked Japan for their support and cooperation on a range of areas, and they agreed that there are a number of global issues that we'll continue to work closely on. So it wasn't intended in that way.
Change the subject.
Sure.
On Gambia.
Yes.
The Gambia.
The Gambia.
I was wondering what yesterday the Department of Justice announced that it had two individuals, I believe, that was related to the recent coup in Gambia. Do you know of any other arrests that have taken place with the connection to the U.S. of this coup?
Well, given it's an ongoing legal case, I don't think it would surprise you that I can't comment on matters related to the ongoing investigation of the two U.S. citizens, and I don't have any other information about arrests or intended arrests.
One of the issues from the Gambia has been the U.S. Link to this attempted coup. Has there been some contact between Kerry and Gambian officials to reassure them that this was not a U.S. effort to dethrone him or any way, or that it is being that there is an investigation, and what he hopes to get out of it?
There has not. I don't have any calls or any contact from the Secretary to read out. I think we've been reiterating publicly, and I'm happy to do again, that the United States government had no role in the attempted coup that took place, and that certainly is a message we'll continue to convey in every avenue we have the opportunity to.
Do you know that if any of these, some of these, I'm still got my head in Cuba, they're not distant. Some of these coup, people trying to overthrow the government, alleged coup plotters, isn't it? Also had some links to the U.S. military. I think one of them might have served in Iraq. Do you have any of that? Can you confirm any of that?
I would refer you to the Department of Defense for anything about links to the military.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I understood. Maybe not at the Secretary's level, but can you ask to see if there's been any contact with lower-ranking officials,
Sure,
or even or the embassy, because the president of Gambia had blamed terrorist groups and even suggested that there was some kind of an official U.S. link. So I'd just be curious to know if you've had if someone sat down with him or called him and explained to him exactly what, or one of his aides, what's going on.
I'm happy to check on contact, and obviously I would reiterate we were not involved in this. Can I just take the opportunity? There were two questions yesterday that I just wanted to address quickly. Somebody asked about the language in the Department of Justice letter. The word friendly is used in the legal sense to mean the United States is at peace with the Gambia. It's not meant to convey a warming of the status of relations in that way. In terms of the adjective, it's a legal term. The second piece on human rights, which I was also asked about, I mentioned, of course, that we certainly regularly raise our human rights concerns with senior Gambian government officials. Two kind of historic things, as you are all reporting on this. One, on December 23rd, the United States terminated the Gambia's Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, as you all know of it, eligibility due to the lack of progress with respect to human rights, rule of law, political pluralism, and the right to due process. And on November 24th, the United States expressed dismay regarding the president's decision to sign into law legislation that further restricts the rights of LGBT individuals, as well as deep concern about the reported arrest and detention of suspected LGBT individuals in the Gambia. So just two recent pieces.
I'm mystified that lawyers actually told you that friendly is a legal term now. But I'm sure it is, meaning the United States is every country in the
It's
world. The
used-
United States believes that every
Maybe not a
country in the
legal
world
term, let me rephrase it.
is
It's used in the
friendly.
legal sense. So
Okay, the legal sense, though, that would suggest that any country with which the United States is not currently at war, which is every country in the world except for North Korea, because it's an armistice, not a truce, that means that you consider Iran to be a friendly country?
well, the way that language may be used, Matt, is not meant to imply something about the specifics of the closeness of the relationship. That's what I was communicating
Well,
here.
but I mean, do these same lawyers suggest that Iran is a friendly country?
I don't
Would
believe
they?
we've used it in that way in a
Or
letter.
Venezuela,
No,
for
but we can
example?
discuss legal
Or Cuba?
legal use if we have an
Or
Iran letter to talk about.
Belarus or Zimbabwe?
We could go all day. Let's change the subject.
Can I just stay in Africa, though?
Sure.
There are reports out of Uganda that a senior LRA commander has turned himself into U.S. troops in the Central African Republic. Do you know anything about this?
We are aware of reports that Dominic Ongwen, one of the LRA's senior leaders, is in the custody of U.S. forces deployed to the Central African Republic in support of the African Union's regional counter-LRA task force. In coordination with the AURTF, U.S. military forces took custody of an individual claiming to be a defector from the LRA. That individual later identified himself as Ongwen. Efforts to establish full and positive identification continue, so I don't have confirmation of that at this point. If the individual proves to be Ongwen, his defection would represent a historic blow to the LRA's command structure. It is clear that despite the regional challenges, the AU Regional Task Force continues to make great strides toward ending the LRA threat. So it's obviously new information as of today.
Do you know if the military people who have custody of him now have reason to believe that he is not, in fact, the person who he says he is?
I think I don't have more details than what I've offered. The Department of Defense may have more specifics, but obviously they're working to confirm the details.
And is it the Pentagon that people should be asking on these, or is it AFRICOM?
I can check on that. I mean, you can certainly start with the Pentagon, and they can probably direct you to the right people.
All right, but I mean, presumably you know what this guy looks like, right? So, I mean, does he bear a resemblance to?
I'm just not going to speculate. I'll point anyone to the Department of Defense or the appropriate military contacts.
Can I have another
Sure.
question? On Iran, there's an Iranian or there's a agency reporting that the Iran talks are going to take place on the 18th of January. We understand it could be as soon as January 15. Can you give us the correct date on that? And is it at a political level or ministers?
I've seen those reports. They have typically been at the political director's level, so certainly it's safe to assume that. As you know, the EU has the lead, so we expect they'll have more specifics to announce on the dates and timing and program in the coming days.
Okay.
Sure.
Yesterday, I think about the former President Chen Shui-bian's medical parole, you had some statement, but you didn't bring it up. Could you set it on the record? And regarding the flag raising ceremony, you said U.S. didn't know that in advance. Taiwan's representative in the U.S. Admit that he didn't inform U.S. in advance, but they have reached understanding afterward. And U.S. officials said, they can just left everything behind and move on. I wonder if this is true.
I don't have anything to add to yesterday, which I already gave an on the record comment yesterday. I don't know if you have a new question to offer. I'm happy to answer it if you do.
You mean President Chen Shui-bian's medical?
Oh,
plan?
yes,
Yeah.
that, sure. Let's see. We have noted former President Chen Shui-bian's release on medical parole. While the United States has raised concerns about Mr. Chen's health with the Taiwan authorities, we were not involved in his release. This issue was for the Taiwan authorities to decide.
And Jane, about the flag raising ceremony, yesterday you said U.S. did not, was not notified in advance, but Taiwan's government said, they have a rich understanding afterward. Could you comment on that?
Well, one, I think I would just reiterate what I said yesterday, is that it's inconsistent with our policy, and not notified in advance means you didn't know about it in advance, which seems consistent with what you just said. Do we have any more on Taiwan?
Well, yeah, because after the briefing yesterday, I read a couple of reports about this. And I'm just, what had it previously been not allowed for the Taiwanese mission here to raise the flag at the representative's office, residence?
Well, I think the issue is that it's inconsistent with the spirit of our policy, and it's violated our longstanding understanding on the conduct of our unofficial relations. I'm not sure if there was a previous incident to speak of.
So, well, you have the Chinese. Well, you were asked yesterday if the Chinese had complained directly to you. Do you know if they have?
I don't have any more specifics on that. I'd point you to the Chinese.
But this is the first time you're aware of this ever happening.
I don't have any historic record of flag raising issues, so I don't have a confirmation of that or not.
Is there any repercussion? Is there any consequence to people put? I mean, I presume that there's an American flag at the AIT in Taipei. Yeah. I mean, is there any? Does it have any consequence that they?
Well, we're in discussions with U.S. officials in Taipei and Washington are in discussions with Taiwan authorities about the matter. I don't have any other specifics for you.
And how does it get remedied? Do they have to take it down?
I just don't have anything to predict for you at this point.
Oh, wait, but can we find out? Because
if I have something more to offer, I'm happy to share it. I'm not sure that I will at this point because we're still discussing with them.
So Jane, has you considered Twin Oak estate as a private estate
or official capacity?
Well, I think it's not about the U.S. views it. It's a representative compound. It's not a private person's home. Go ahead.
When you say yesterday, the ceremony is not consistent with U.S. policy. So, what kind of message you would like to deliver to Taiwan, such as "Don't do that again," or?
I think the message is what we've been conveying, which is that we're disappointed with the action. The flag-raising ceremony violated our longstanding understanding on the conduct of our unofficial relations. We have a robust set of cultural relations, but we do not have diplomatic relations, and we'll continue to discuss this with the proper officials.
Well, that's a bit more than you said yesterday. You're disappointed in it.
I believe I said exactly that yesterday.
You did say that? Okay, I must have missed it. Well, regarding other disputed areas, I mean, would you have the same problem if, I don't know, if the Dalai Lama's office here put a Tibetan flag up?
We can discuss that if that happens, Matt. I'm happy to talk to our team about that.
Georgia, I mean, South Ossetia, Crimea.
We could do this all day. It's like a board game. Go ahead. Yes.
As you know, a hunger strike by Ukrainian pilot Nadia Savchenko, who is being held in Russia, enters fourth week. Yesterday, a Twitter storm started to support her release, and as I know, the U.S. ambassador in Ukraine, Jeffrey Pyatt, joined this action. Does the Department of State support this action, and do you have any comments or statement on this issue?
Sure. Well, we welcome the exchange of some detained persons in December. Hundreds remain in captivity. We reiterate our condemnation of Russia's continued detention of Ukrainian hostages inside Russia, including a Ukrainian member of parliament, Nadia Savchenko, and film producer Oleg Sentsov. We understand that Ms. Sevchenko is on a hunger strike, as you mentioned, to protest the terms of her detention and is suffering additional health problems. We call for her immediate release, as well as other Ukrainian hostages held by Russia. Any more on Ukraine? Okay. Go ahead.
You're not going to. Well, maybe you do know about it, but I doubt it because I just
Okay.
saw the move now, and I'm not.
I don't unfortunately have any magic up
I
here.
know. So your colleague at the White House just said that the president will veto this Keystone legislation if it's approved. I'm just wondering. I'm not asking you to comment on that. I'm just wondering how is the review? What's the status of where things stand with the?
Well, there's not an update because as we've noted in the past, there's a Nebraska court case which obviously could determine the route or if there would be changes to the route. That in terms of the official process would be the next step.
The court verdict, the decision
Right.
by the court. So there will not be the review will not be completed until at least that is done.
Yes,
the
that's
court
correct.
rules.
Go ahead in the back.
Because Representative Shen, he said at a press conference in Taipei yesterday that he said he need no permission to hold a private session. I mean, such as a flag raising ceremony.
Well, as I stated, it's a representative compound. It's not a private home, and I think I made clear what our views are. So I don't have anything more to add. Do you have any more questions? Go ahead.
South Korea is claiming that North Korea has nuclear capacity to be able to reach the United States. Is the U.S. at all concerned about their findings?
Well, we don't comment, as you know, on intelligence matters. In generally speaking, North Korea's ballistic missile launches and continued development of its ballistic missile program and related activities constitute clear violations of multiple UN Security Council resolutions and have been condemned by the international community. We continue to urge North Korea to comply with its UN Security Council obligations, and we obviously continue to closely monitor the situation on the Korean Peninsula and remain steadfast in our commitment to the defense of our allies, certainly including South Korea. All right, thanks everyone.
Wait,
What?
when you say because the intel matters, that means you can't comment on this claim that the South Korean claim that the North Korean has this cyber army of 6,000 cyborg, or not cyborg, sorry, 6,000 strong cyber army. That's something you're not prepared to comment on?
I don't have any specifics on that. I'm happy to see if there's more we can offer.
All right.
All right, thanks everyone.